Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Here today from Yahoo Research Labs. David was our intern with us in 1998, working on collaborative filtering. He's gone on to work on many topics from collaborative filtering, internet, e-commerce. What he's going to talk to us today is about information markets, a topic we're interested in here at Microsoft. We've run a few experiments, and what he's going to tell us is how he can take one of these information markets and run it like a racetrack. Okay, thanks, David.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm going to describe an economic mechanism I've been working on recently, which is useful for hedging risk and also for speculating or wagering and information aggregation. I'll call it a dynamic Paramutual market. So there are a variety of existing mechanisms, economic mechanisms for hedging and speculating, and they kind of break down into two categories: mechanisms used in the financial world, mechanisms used in gambling. By far the most common mechanism in the financial world is the continuous double auction. So this is the mechanism that's used for stocks, for options, for futures. Almost every public financial instrument that's publicly traded is traded using this mechanism, the continuous double auction. And I'll describe in a little bit later how that works. A slight variant of that is a continuous double auction with Market Maker. But there's also a world of mechanisms that are commonly used in gambling. So, for example, there's the Paramutual Market, which I'll describe later. That's the one you might be less familiar with. The Paramutual Market, for historical reasons, is used in places like horse race betting, also highlight. Another common form of gambling is a bookmaker. So this is what happens when you go to Las Vegas and you go to a casino. There's a bookmaker there who's giving you some odds on Team A or Team B. But essentially, a bookmaker is just like a market maker, and I'll describe how those are the same later. So a lot of times, most people find these two worlds to be socially distinct, but logically they're kind of the same. You can use both mechanisms for hedging, both for speculating. And now there's increasing crossover. So, for example, there's sites like Betfair, which is basically a sports betting site, but it uses a continuous double auction, and they call it peer-to-peer betting, but it's basically a continuous double auction. This Betfair is sort of taking over gambling over in the UK. It's kind of dominating the William Hills and these venerable companies of the world. And other sites like Trade Sports, which is maybe more known in the US, also runs a continuous double auction. And there's also some crossover going the other way. So traditional bookmakers are providing odds for financial instruments, and even financial types will go there to hedge and things like that. Most of this is happening not in the United States. Okay, so this is the outline of the talk. First, I'll give some background on financial markets and parimutuel markets and compare various mechanisms in terms of what properties they have, and then I'll get into this new mechanism, which I'll call the dynamic parimutuel mechanism. Okay, so what do I mean by a financial prediction market? So the idea here is we take some random variable you're interested in. So these are all binary variables. Will there be an earthquake in California in 2004? Yes or no? Will President Bush be elected in November? Yes or no? So these are binary random variables. I might be interested in, right? I might be interested in the outcomes. I'm also interested in the probabilities of these things. But yet I don't really know the true probability. But any variable would work. Like I roll a pair of dice, and will the sum of those dice be 6? That's a random variable. But so these are all binary. The same thing works for discrete variables or continuous variables. So what do you do? You take that random variable and turn it into a financial instrument, where the payoff of that financial instrument equals the realized value of the variable. So in the binary case, the payoff is $1 if the event happens, nothing otherwise. So if I own this piece of paper, then after the dice gets rolled, I'm entitled to $1 if the sum comes up as 6. And so that's what it's worth in the future, but what's it worth now? It's worth the expected value. Well, if I'm risk neutral, and for small amounts of money I probably am, it's worth, to me, this thing is worth the expected value of the random variable. So it's worth probably 13 cents approximately, 13, 14 cents. Okay, so why would I do this? Well, for each individual, this thing is worth the expected value. And if you open up a market in this thing, there's a lot of theory and also laboratory evidence and also empirical evidence of real markets where the price, the equilibrium price that gets created from the interaction of lots of different people is very, very good. It's a very, very good estimate of the expectation of that random variable. So if you have some random variable that you care about, that you want to know the expectation of it, this is a good mechanism. It has a good track record of being one of the best mechanisms for providing good estimates. Another nice thing is it reacts almost instantly. It has this property of dynamic information aggregation. So it is in my incentive to act almost immediately, to act immediately as soon as I know some information about that random variable. Because if I don't act now, someone else might do it before me, and I'll lose my edge. So the market will react almost instantly to changing information. And if you believe it's an efficient market, then all you care about is today's price. All you need is today's price, at least in terms of estimating the expectation of the random variable. You can basically throw away everything, all the past history. The single best estimate of the expectation is today's price.
What's your definition of efficient? What does that mean?
Basically, it means information is incorporated immediately.
Does everybody have? But not everyone has the same information.
Not everyone has the same information, but everyone who obtains information kind of reacts immediately. And then there's consequences of that basically say that if you assume those things, then the price will follow a random walk. There's also different levels of efficiency. Okay, so another nice property is that you don't have to wait. So if I'm buying shares of George Bush to win or to lose, I don't have to wait till the election to make a profit. I can kind of cash out before. I can buy low, sell high. This is just a picture of what I mean by dynamic information aggregation. This is a market from the Iowa electronic market. It's a real money market run from the University of Iowa. And this is shares of different candidates in the Democratic nomination, Democratic National, who will win the Democratic nomination. So John Kerry, so this green one is John Kerry, so it's clear by now that John Kerry will be the nominee, but it wasn't so clear, say back here, that this is Howard Dean. So at one point Howard Dean was the favorite, but right around the Iowa caucus, this is information coming in about Iowa voting, Howard Dean kind of drops off to nowhere, and John Kerry reacts almost instantly. This here is John Edwards, kind of with a little bit of last gasps of hope in South Carolina. Yeah.
Anything like the 97 cents?
I guess, yeah, that's some. Well, first of all, this slide is not.
Oh, it's only. Oh, I see. I didn't read that.
But it's still probably not at 100. The reason is, you might get assassinated, or there's there is a possibility of some random thing happening. Yeah. So.
Value those random things at 3%.
Not 3%, no, but. I think if you go to the site right now, it should be near 99. So I've talked about the predictive ability of these markets. The flip side of the predictive ability is hedging. In fact, the hedging is the primary motivation for most of the financial markets. And in fact, that's the legal, for the market to be legal, there has to be sort of there has to be a good value of hedging in that market for a financial market. So, like for example, options, futures, insurance, they could all be thought of as ways to hedge risk. So, insurance market is the most clear. I'm hedging the risk of a disaster, but also the price of insurance is predictive in the sense that it's related to the probability of the catastrophe. Futures, you can think of futures as predicting the price of something in the future, but a lot of people use futures to hedge risk. So American Airlines buys oil futures because if the price of oil goes up high, American Airlines is in trouble, so they need some sort of compensation if that happens. So how do these auctions, so let's get into the various mechanisms. The continuous double auction, I mentioned, this is the main mechanism used by most financial markets. And it's, for example, it's what's used for stock markets. The way it works is there's something that's being bought and sold. So it could be a stock, but it could be this thing like $1 if George Bush wins the election. That's the thing people are trading. All the buyers are coming in and they say, I'm willing to pay this price. I'm willing to buy 100 shares at this price. I'm willing to buy 50 shares at this price. The sellers are saying the same thing. I'm willing to sell this many 100 shares at some price. And so everyone puts in what they're willing to do, and basically instantly, as soon as some buyer is willing to pay price P and some seller is willing to sell at some price P or less, as soon as there's any agreement in this system at all, there's a transaction instantaneously. And so this is called the buy queue, and this is called the ask queue, and these are arranged in descending order, these are arranged in ascending order, and anytime there's a crossover, there's an instantaneous transaction. So at equilibrium, there's going to be some gap between the highest bid price and the lowest ask price. That's very old, sorry. It's probably before a few splits, I think. Okay, so this is the continuous double auction. It's used for stock markets and all kinds of things. It's also been, as I mentioned, now it's being used by gambling sites. So, for example, this is Trade Sports. They have trading on sporting events, of course, but they also have trading on events like, will Osama bin Laden be captured by a certain date? Or they also have trading on various financial numbers, economic numbers. And this is you can see the bid and ask queue here, and it's exactly like, it is a continuous double auction. The interesting thing about a CDA for sports betting is now you don't have to get your bet in before the game starts. You can kind of keep betting even after the game starts, because the prices and the probabilities will change as it becomes clear one team is winning, but you can kind of keep revising your bet, and it makes for sort of a whole other level of gambling. The Iowa electronic market that I mentioned, that runs using the continuous double auction. Even these play money, there's a bunch of play money markets also that just use, so they're not real money, it's just a game that you can play. But this site, News Futures, it operates exactly like a continuous double auction in fake money. So I'll keep putting up this slide just to compare all the mechanisms and various properties of the mechanisms. Just to summarize, continuous double auction, for the mechanism itself, there's no risk. It's just matching up buyers and sellers. So it's finding bilateral agreements among traders. But the mechanism itself is not taking any risk at all. And it has this nice property of dynamic updating, dynamic information aggregation. One problem with the CDA is liquidity, and it does arise even in options markets, but it certainly arises on like trade sports and certain markets where there's just not that much interest, so there's nobody there. But if there's nobody there selling things, why should I go there to buy things? So you kind of, there's a chicken and egg problem where you want to go to markets where there's lots of other people, but if there's not enough critical mass, then the market itself can kind of fail. CDA with market maker, it's basically the same thing, but now there's some extremely active high volume trader. And that could be a normal trader, but often that trader is kind of institutionally affiliated or has some connection to the institution. And roughly this market maker sets the price by like always being willing to sell at some always willing to sell at some price P, and also always willing to buy at some bigger price Q, and it just sort of injects liquidity into the system, but this market maker is taking on risk, right? Because the market maker has to be pretty smart about what prices it's setting. It has to know a lot about a lot of the information, and also has to react to demand. So if a lot of people are buying, it may want to move up its prices, and yeah.
Somebody followed your slide without hitting the title to go bankrupt because he buys high, sells low.
I did it backwards? Okay, yeah. The sell at price P. Right. You want to buy, buy it at price P and sell at price, buy low, sell high, So constantly, good, thank you. Yeah, that's a very large risk. Right, so the market maker tries to make money by buying low and selling high, but it has to constantly adjust. So some examples of market makers, there's another site that's similar to Trade Sports, but called the World Sports Exchange, where they run what looks like a double auction on sporting events, but also on the election, and also like on American Idol. And they maintain a bid-ask spread, but really it's just a market maker who's sitting behind the scenes setting these things. The Hollywood Stock Exchange is a play money market, and they have this market maker as well. They call it the virtual specialist. And so there's always some price you can buy and sell things on the Hollywood Stock Exchange. They don't really care if their market maker loses money because it's all play money anyway. And so actually, talking to them, their market maker does lose money in general, but it's all fake money anyway. This market maker has to be very careful because that's real money. Another mechanism is the bookmaker. The bookmaker is what is commonly used in sports betting and for example, in Las Vegas. Really, the bookmaker is like a market maker. I mean, the bookmaker sets the odds for Team A and sets the odds for Team B, such that if it's such there's a spread, basically. And I mean, the bookmaker needs to adjust according to demand and also according to information. So, in some sense, these two concepts are basically the same thing. So what you get with a market maker or a bookmaker is you're getting liquidity because there's this trader who's always willing to accept trades, but now that market maker is accepting some amount of risk. So you're getting liquidity, now you're taking on risk, but you still have this dynamic information aggregation property. Okay. The third main type of mechanism that I'll describe is Paramutual Mechanism, and that's perhaps the one you're less familiar with. The Paramutual market, I think mainly just for historical reasons, is used mainly at horse racing and also high-lie betting. So it's often used at the horse races, but really any event you can use a Paramutual market. But I'll talk about horses just because that's traditionally where it's used. But any binary event, so this is a mutually exclusive, exhaustive set of outcomes, A and B. So how does this work? Well, people put their money on one side or the other. So someone comes in, puts $3 on A, someone puts $4 on B, $1 on A, $4 on B. So people are just wagering on which one they think will win. I'll tell you in a minute why they might decide one or the other. But for now, this is how the mechanism works. So all the people put in their money. Now the betting stops and the horses race, and let's say A wins. So everyone who bet on B loses their money, right? That makes sense. And all their money goes over to the people who are correct, the people who bet on A, and it goes to them in direct proportion to the amount they bet. So this person gets $6, which is 3 times as much as this person who only gets $2. So see how it gets redistributed?
You said that the Paramutual trust has to be binary?
No, it can be discrete. Anything discrete will work fine. So just a subtle point, which for now, there's 2 kind of ways to think about this redistribution. For now, they're equivalent, but when we get to the dynamic Paramutual, they're different. There's 2 ways to think about this redistribution. One is the money that was on A. The money that was on A, they keep their original money, keep their original dollar, and they split all the money on B in proportion to the amount they bet. Or another way to think of it is all the money gets pooled into one big thing, one big pot, and it gets redistributed in proportion to the people who bet on A. So it's exactly equivalent here, but later there'll be a distinction. So why would you bet on one or the other? Well, the way it works in practice is you're at the racetrack, and what the racetrack tells you is what are the current odds, and the current odds are saying if you bet $1 on horse A now, if everything stopped now, no more money came in, the whole system stopped, and you were correct, you would get $1.20. If you put $1 on B and everything stopped and you were correct, you would get $25. But this is just the current odds. It's really not telling you exactly what you'll win. I mean, it could be that after you place your bet on B, hundreds of other people put money on B, and your actual payout's going to be much, much less. So basically what this is saying is there's an incentive to wait till the end for a variety of reasons. There's 2 reasons you want to wait till the end in a Paramutual. One is information might change. So one horse might get injured, so in a horse race it's not as clear why information would come in, but like the election, there's constantly information coming in about the election. So it's clear that that's one reason why Paramutual is not used for that type of situation. So that's one reason to wait to the end. The other reason is to wait to see exactly what the odds are going to be. The other drawback is you have to wait until the very end to get any money. You have to wait till the race outcome is known to win anything. You can't buy low, sell high, that type of thing.
Presumably, you make a private sale with your ticket.
Not really. At any given time, your ticket's worth exactly $1. There's no reason to sell it for more or less than $1. It's well, let me put it this way. I think at most tracks they'll let you switch your money. So if your money's on horse A, you can go there and say, no, actually I want it on B. So you'd always, yeah, if they allow that kind of a thing, it's always worth $1, basically.
Not necessarily with the house. Yeah, it might be.
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
Something else.
So this is ignoring the amount that the track takes. So the track takes like 17% right off the top. But then your dollar's worth less than $1, but it's, yeah. Okay. So Paramutual Market, there's no risk to the institution, right, because they're just handing money from one person to another. there's sort of a notion of infinite liquidity. Anybody can come to the track and put their money on any outcome at any time, but it doesn't have this dynamic information aggregation. Okay, so what does have dynamic information? So this is what I'll call the dynamic Paramutual market. And so in the standard Paramutual market, well, are there any questions about the mechanisms? Okay. Standard Paramutual market, like I said, every dollar is worth the same no matter when you put it in the system. The basic idea here is simple. The value of your dollar actually changes depending on what's the status of wagering. So if lots of people are betting on A, my dollar is worth less. My dollar bet on A is worth less than if I get in when no one else knows anything. No one else is betting on A. Okay. You could describe the whole mechanism in these terms, like what's the value of a dollar at any given time. But I think I find it more natural to encode this dynamic value in a way people are familiar with, which is we'll talk about what you're buying is a share of the pot, and you're buying it at some price, and the price is what's varying. So the price of A is lower when there's less money being bet on A. Okay, that's the basic idea. But notice there's a little bit of an issue here where as I'm buying shares of A, I'm adding money to the pot of A, the price is going up, and it's sort of continuous. As I am buying things, I'm adding money, which is raising the price. So price is really a function, and if I want the cost of buying some finite amount of shares, like 10 shares, I'd have to take the integral of that price function. And I'll tell you how to derive the price function in a minute. So, but this is how the interface would look, at least to a trader. There's the two outcomes, A and B. What's published is the current payoff per share. So if you own a share and everything stopped right now, and A won, you would win $5.20. This is the price of the share of A and price of the shares of B, and there's a bid-ask Q for both. So you you can put in a buy order or put in a sell order if you own a share or whatever. But there's also the system is setting prices for shares based on the price function. So that, again, there's the infinite liquidity where the system will always accept a buy order at some price. But as you keep buying more, the price is going up. So that's the basic. This is what the interface would look like. So now let's get into the mathematics of it a little bit. This is the notation, A and B. Price is PRI, payoff is PAY. This is money on both sides, total money, and this is number of shares on both sides. So like I mentioned, the price function tells you how much you need to pay to buy a bunch of shares. But the price function gives the instantaneous price per share of an infinitesimally small share piece of the pot. And if you want the cost of some finite number, you take the integral. And how do I get this price function? Well, different assumptions lead to different ones. So let's talk about that. And as I mentioned, there's two different cases, and they both turn out to be different. There's the case where if you win, you keep all your original money, and you get an equal share of all the losers' money. Or there's the case where we put all the money in one big pot, and a share means I get a piece of that. And so these two turn out to be different in the dynamic case. So let's talk about the first case first, losing money redistributed. Okay, so the payoff per share is the money that's on 2 divided by number of shares on 1, right? Oh, question?
I'm sorry, I'm confused about a point, and if you said it, I apologize. But are shares bought from the house or in the continuous double market auction, or both?
Shares are purchased from the house, but there's there can always be more shares issued. It's not like the stock market where there's some constant number of shares.
So if I want to buy something, I can either go to the double market or to the house to buy it? Or...
Well, yeah, but they'll both be in the same. They'll both be listed on the same queue. Basically, you'll be buying from the house, but if someone else wants to sell the thing that they bought, they'll kind of insert their sell order on the same queue. And the only way you would buy theirs instead of buying it from the house is if their price was lower. So you might buy theirs because the price is lower, but then as soon as you buy all the ones from other people, the system is there, the house is there to sell even more.
The house is kind of playing the role of a market maker.
Yeah.
And initially it seems a certain...
Initially, yeah, you have to start with some positive amount of money on both sides and shares on both sides. So, in principle, it requires a subsidy. But maybe you could get that back with maybe it's an ante that everyone has to put in a certain ante or something like that. So, okay, the payoff is money on 2 divided by number of shares on 1. So this is, if you're a trader, your expected payoff per share for some infinitesimal number of shares is probability that I'm right divided by this, which I'll get to in a minute, plus probability that I'm wrong minus the money that I put into it. So this is my expected value of the payoff, when the whole system ends, given that I'm correct. It's like the regular Paramutual market. You have to predict into the future what you think the payoff will be. So, but what I've done to simplify the mathematics is sort of the same assumption that goes into the regular Paramutual, is that the expected payoff at the end is equal to what the payoff says right now. I'd like to derive this from first principles, like efficient market hypothesis. I haven't been able to do that yet. So this is a significant assumption here, but it greatly simplifies the mathematics. And I think it may be a reasonable assumption in some cases. Okay, so then we get this. So we need the notion of market probability. Market probability is, it's sort of what the market thinks the probability of the event is. And that it's naturally set at the probability at which expected value of buying a share is 0. If the expected value was greater than 0, there'd be excess demand, and otherwise there'd be excess supply. So it's sort of, since we're assuming it's in equilibrium, this is the point at which that's the market's belief in the probability. So for these particular equations, the market you can just figure out the market probability. It's this. Okay, how do you derive the price function? Well, we need some constraint. So let's make some assumptions. This is kind of a natural assumption here. The price of A equals the payoff of B, and the price of B equals the payoff of A. It seems natural. It's getting the right signs. If more and more people are putting money on A, you'd expect the price of A to go up, but you'd also expect the payoff of B to go down, to go up. Okay, it reduces. Now you only have to think about 2 numbers instead of 4, so that's nice. Okay, so if you make this assumption, that the market probability becomes this, and you can solve for the price function. Basically, this is price equals payoff. Price, like I said, price is instantaneous money per share. And so you just set up this differential equation. M is number of dollars and n is number of shares, and you can just solve this, and so you get the, it's just a differential equation. Now we get the price function. This is now concrete. The price of n shares, the price, the instantaneous price after I buy 100 shares is this. The cost is the integral of the price, right? So if I want to buy 100 shares, I integrate the price from 0 to 100, and I get this. But so as far as traders are concerned, I think we can completely hide the fact that it's a continuous, and that we have to take integrals and all that. You can just discretize. It's pretty trivial to see how you can discretize this. So it looks, to a trader, it just looks more natural.
To a trader, the price for buying one share, for buying 100 shares, is more than 100 times the price for buying one share.
That's right. Yeah.
So like they were going to list, a price, you'd says.
Yeah. So if you
real world's kind of like that too. I know, because if you try to buy 5 billion shares of Microsoft, you get nothing more than if I want. But it's a little weird.
Well, yeah. There's two ways you could do that. One is you could put one share at a time, whatever level you discretize it at. So this is just saying, let's sell 100 shares at the cost of the 100th share. So actually, traders would be spending a little more than they should if you discretize it this way. Mm-hmm. So you can round off at any point and basically just charge a little more than you should, but to simplify the interface. Or maybe some people feel that other interface would be more natural, where you just say, I want to buy 100 shares, tell me how much it'll cost. And that's another possibility. How much time do I have?
We can go a little till 11:30 maybe.
Okay. Okay, so like I said, you can make different assumptions and end up with different price functions. So this also seems like a natural assumption. The price of A, the ratio of prices equals the ratio of money. And that seems pretty reasonable, right? That if there's 3 times as much money on A as B, the price of A should be 3 times the price of B. So let's take this assumption and see what happens. We can derive market probability. We can set up the differential equation. This is for instantaneous price. Instantaneous price is equal to this thing, and then it just turns it into a differential equation, and you can solve it. So now we get some other price and cost functions. In the case, like I mentioned, if you put all the money into one big pot and then redistribute that, it ends up being different. So that now the payoff is all the money distributed, all the money in one pot distributed to the winning side. And so you get a different expected value problem. The market probability is also different. And now we do the same thing. It turns out that first assumption I made doesn't make sense in this case, but the second assumption still makes sense. So the ratio of prices equals ratio of money. That implies this market probability, and we can solve for price and cost. I found closed form for price in terms of price as a function of shares. I couldn't find the closed form for price as a function of money. I'm sorry, this is price as a function of money. I couldn't find the reverse, price as a function of shares, but it doesn't really, you can easily solve it numerically. It's not, I don't think it's a big issue. Okay, so I mentioned you can kind of cash out early, and how does that work? Well, in this case of all money being redistributed, selling is really, really easy. because there's one big pot, every share is a share of that pot. A share is a share. You know, it doesn't matter if I bought it, when I bought it, I still have one share. So I can just sell on the same queue as the system, the same bid-ask queue. So in this case, all money redistributed. Aftermarkets work great. It's easy, simple. It all works in the same system. There's complication when in the first case where only the losing money is redistributed. The reason is when I own a share, it actually matters what price I paid, because owning a share entitles me to a refund of the price I paid plus a share of the payoff. So it kind of has two parts, and if I bought it, depending when I bought it and what price I paid, I own something different than other people, so it's not trivial to see how you could sell it. But it is possible to sell in a fairly natural way. You kind of sell the two parts into two aftermarkets, but there's a way to bundle them together. So I think there's a way to sort of hide it from the user, the fact that they're going into two different aftermarkets. Really, you can bundle it. You can just sell into one market, and it automatically gets split up and bundled. We can talk, if you're interested in details of that, we can talk about it later. This is an alternative aftermarket for the losing money redistributed case. Let's go through this kind of example. Let's say I bought one share for $5, and now let's say the price went from 5 to 10. So I want to cash out and get my $5. I want to cash out and get my profit. I want to leave early. Well, the going market price is 10, so I can sell a half a share for 5. So now I get my $5 back, and I still have a half a share. And this half a share has non-negative value. In fact, it has positive expected value. So I cashed out of the system, and I'm left with something with positive value. On the reverse situation, if the price goes from 5 to 2, and I want to limit my loss, I can sell my share for 2. I get 2 of the $5 back, so now my loss is limited to 3. And I also get to keep this refund of $3. And so actually my loss is either going to be 3 or 0, but it's been limited. My loss no longer can be 5. Okay. So this is back to the running comparison. Dynamic Paramutual Market, it still redistributes money from one person to another. There's no risk for the market mechanism. It sort of has infinite liquidity, although it's like one-sided liquidity. In other words, I can always buy. The market will always sell to me, but I can't always be guaranteed this. I can always be guaranteed to buy. I can't be guaranteed to sell. And it does have a dynamic character to it, because the price is being affected by information. In other words, yeah. So it has this characteristic where it can react instantly and meaningfully to new information. I'll mention market scoring rules. Market scoring rules, I encourage you to look at this paper by Robin Hanson. I won't go into the details of the mechanism, but I'll be happy to talk about it afterwards. It ends up that the market scoring rule is also a pretty fascinating mechanism, and it has a lot of the same properties as DPM. You can also conceptualize it as an automated market maker. It requires a subsidy, and that subsidy is variable. So in a sense, it requires some risk, but the risk is bounded. The amount of the subsidy is bounded. So really, in terms of properties, these two mechanisms are quite similar. But in terms of mechanics, they're actually quite different. So I'd like to sort of do empirical comparisons, see what kind of thing appeals to traders more. So here's just some pros and cons. This losing money redistributed has pros and cons, and the all money redistributed case has as well. The good thing about losing money redistributed, well, you're guaranteed never to lose money if you're correct, because you get a refund and then you get possibly extra. The problem is this aftermarket gets really complicated. The good thing about all money redistributed is, well, the aftermarket is just trivial. Everything makes perfect sense. There's one big flaw, or I don't know about flaw, but caveat for this one here. You actually could pick the right side. You could put your money on A, but if you buy it at too high of a price and the price goes way down later and other people can get in at much lower price, you actually could end up losing money even though you picked the right bet. Yeah.
You claim the market has no risk. Now, it seems to me if at some stage everybody bets on A, the market sells A, he's going to have some risk. Maybe you limit the risk to some small amount, but there's got to be some risk. Simply because he's selling bets on only one thing and the other guys don't come in.
Yeah, but as people keep buying and buying A, the amount that they're going to get.
So the risk is limited by some exponential.
Yeah, there is a subsidy that has to start up this whole thing, but it's not variable.
The seed doesn't have some risk.
The seed, well, it's more of a technicality, I guess. Risk means some variability, whereas it's exactly known exactly how much subsidy is required, and it's exactly bounded.
Is it Hanson's?
Hanson is also bounded, but it's variable. So really, I should just put this as a blue box, I think. The two properties are quite similar. I mean, Hanson's method is bounded but variable, so technically that's risk, whereas this isn't. But I agree, it's more of a technical issue than anything in terms of real practical significance. Pros and cons in general. Yeah, it has a lot of nice properties, like I mentioned all along the way. The downsides I see is, well, payoff vector. When you're making your bet, your payoff vector is still indeterminate. So people might not like it quite as much. The interface gets a little complicated, although I think it can be presented in a pretty reasonable way. There's the infinite liquidity is only one-sided. Actually, the market scoring rules has sort of double-sided liquidity, and but the big thing is that I just need to try this thing like in a real environment, see what happens. So open questions and problems. Is this assumption reasonable? And can we derive it from some efficient market? I think that's possible. There's a lot of extensions. I think it might have some nice properties in a combinatorial information market. You could probably be interesting to work out what happens if in a call market where lots of money comes in, and then you compute new prices instead of making everything completely sequential. Yeah, but the big thing is testing this thing empirically. I mean, this is a well-defined zero-sum or positive-sum game, and it'd be interesting to see how people play it. I think the generalization to more than two outcomes is trivial. But you can do. I think you can do more than two discrete outcomes pretty easily, but real valued outcomes become a whole different story. So that's the end of my talk. I appreciate it. And I'll take any questions at this time.
How big a risk does a standard mortgage market maker really take? I mean, it's high volume, but I'm told they were born when one guy from mortgage broke his leg, and they said, bring your business and just come into that guy. So it's not that they're not very big, I think.
The amount of risk they take in Wall Street. Well, it's conceivable that they just have to be extremely careful about what. I mean, it's conceivable that they could lose huge amounts of money. In terms of characterizing it quantitatively, I'm not really sure.
Have you thought about the sort of usability issues of this, right? So it seems like it might be difficult to explain to people what's going on.
Right.
That could be a big impediment.
Definitely. I think I know how to make the interface look reasonable and explain it to people. But you're right. It'll be a little complicated. People won't be quite used to it. So I think it's sort of an empirical question. And so I'd like to try to just try it and try out different things. And there could be other interface. Maybe this whole notion of shares and prices maybe added complication. I thought it would make it more understandable to people familiar with double auctions, but maybe a different interface might end up being better. I'm not 100% sure.
Are there applications, are there particular kinds of markets that you think would be particularly good for?
I think, well, the main thing that I liked about it is this infinite liquidity. So in situations where there's maybe not a whole lot of traffic or not a whole lot of traders, or startup situation where there's the chicken and egg problem of getting enough people involved. So in events of low, potentially few number of traders.
Comparing this to Hansen's market maker, it seems one problem with Hansen's market maker is you have this magic constant which gives you the risk. And the less risk you have, the more volatile the market is. I mean, any trader could move the market a lot. And there's no damping over time. I mean, even after you have $1 billion in the market, it's still moving like mad.
Okay.
Well, it's moving as much as this original constant said it should move.
Okay.
Whereas your system seems to damp over time because as the pots of money on either side grow, which is a desirable quality to have. And you have to gear Hansen's constant down to get less risk. And when you gear it down, you get more volatility. And yours is you didn't list this as one of the pros compared to his.
Good. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. Yeah, the constant here will affect the startup time. Like at the very beginning, 1 penny might affect it greatly. But you're right. As the thing develops, it's going to slow down. Yeah. So okay. Thanks.
As the amount of money in these pots gets really big, this thing starts to look more like a sort of traditional thing, and it probably doesn't. That if I buy 100 shares, it probably doesn't change as much at all. And so this is interesting when the pots of money are really small. But at that point, I'm also thinking, trying to figure out have you thought about what's the value of inside information? So if I actually know that, say, Bin Laden is going to be captured tomorrow, or he's already been captured, but the news is going to come out. It would seem like that inside information is worth more when the pots of money are small. But I don't know if that follows that exactly.
It's not immediately obvious to me, but all these mechanisms have the property where if you have inside information, you're at an advantage.
I think the opposite is true. If you've got tons and tons of money in the mechanism already, and you've got this golden information, the market's going to move very slowly. What you don't want is to suddenly peg the price at one instant. With your first $100, you want to take $1 million to get the price you want.
So I can sink a lot of money into the pot.
That's right. So the inertia is to the insider's benefit.
And I thought a lot of these aggregate information things are where people want to find out what the insiders know.
That was the idea of the policy analysis market, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So then it is sort of important to work out what are the consequences of inside information.
Yeah, and in general, well, I guess more generally, so I've said that there's an incentive for dynamic information aggregation. I haven't worked out the precise incentive. So is it really your incentive to act immediately? Maybe not. Maybe you do have incentive to wait a little bit. Maybe you want.
Well, if what you said was right, I think it's the same deal as the horse race. I should use my inside information at the very last minute.
I don't necessarily think you should wait till the last minute, though, because it could be because if you wait till the last minute, other people might have. If you're a monopolist on that information, that's one thing. But if other people possibly could get that information, you might not want to delay, because otherwise the prices will change before you get there.
Microsoft announces that, they're going to make 3 times as much money as everybody thought they were, and then the next morning, when the market opens, everybody has a buy order at once, and whoever's buy order gets executed first gets in at the lowest price. So it seems like there's some interesting timing issues here, where it's not just that you want perfect information, but that you have a couple of weird effects. One is the speed at which you react to that information, even if you're not in the market. The only way to make you make a lot of money by reacting very quickly, even when everyone has the same information. But also you have a sort of weirdness because of this momentum thing, that it may take a lot of money. When new information comes in, it takes maybe exponentially more money to readjust the price.
But it's not obvious to me. So that's for if your goal is to have the prices react correctly, that's true. But in terms of, let's say I have the information, what should I do as a self-interested agent?
I think if all the agents respond, you don't need more money. You need them to trade in response to the new information. Is that correct? You don't constantly need to pump this thing up with more money.
No. Only at the beginning is where you need some sort of seed at the beginning. But then after that, it's.
Have you thought about the tax or regulatory consequences, whether this was done kind of outside the firewall or inside the firewall? Inside, it sounds like this is going to look exactly like gambling.
Which firewall? Which firewall?
Inside a company versus outside the company.
I think it should have exactly the same problems as all the
We've been thinking about this as if Microsoft funds this thing, then we're basically paying people to predict.
Yeah.
If they're putting their own money down, it's kind of a transfer from among employees. And what is
Microsoft could be buying insurance from the developers that it's all the same shit like that.
So we would have to fund the participants. People are taking their own money to bet on these things. I think that changes the nature of the transaction from a corporate viewpoint.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
So then it's like a basketball.
It's almost exactly like basketball.
But if there really is a subsidy, then it's a positive sum. I guess it doesn't matter, but it's a positive sum gamble rather than a negative sum gamble. So maybe there's something.
I'm no lawyer, but my understanding is that it's all about what's called consideration. If someone's putting their own money at stake, that's one of the things that causes it to be gambling. That's the reason there's no purchase required in the sweepstakes.
Right.
If there's a purchase required, your money would be at stake, therefore it'd be gambling.
Yeah, so that.
But then there's like sort of weird loophole for games of skill. And what exactly is the definition of a game of skill? It's hard to say. But the whole legal that becomes incredibly complicated. But I think this would have all the same problems as all the other mechanisms. No, it's not much different.
I mean, they have the mechanism changes. You're not precisely the same.
It's not the same mechanism, but I think in terms of legally, I think it's very similar.
It seems to me as though you're talking about the user interface and whatnot. Can't you just hide all the math by?
Yeah.
And trade sports is wildly popular, and it just shows the sequence of purchases. So what is it that
Yeah.
might make this more,
This is what it would look, yeah, I absolutely agree. You can hide all the math. This is sort of what, but you're still left with a little more complication than usual. You have 4 different numbers you have to look at instead of 2, I guess. That's the main thing. But this is what it would look like. This is how I picture the interface would look like. You have to look at the price of each share and the payout of each share. So there's 4 things you need to worry about. And each price looks like a continuous double auction, even though it's
Instead of the payoff being 1,
right. Instead of payoff being exactly 1, the payoff changes. That's the main distinction.
but can't they normalize it? Can they
You
just,
can't normalize it, no, because
if you let them buy a fraction of the share?
no, yeah, I've tried. I'd love to be able to normalize it, but I don't think you can do that. Because then the basic thing here is when you make your bet, you don't really know what your payoff is going to be. It's a variable. If you could normalize it, then you would know for sure it's $1.
All right.